All right, hello everybody. My name is Shayne Silvers. I've written a couple fantasy books, and I'm trying to figure out how to make enough money that I could buy pants without holes in them. So we've got Michael Anderle here, Martha Carr, R.J. Blain, and then Derek Murphy, and we're just going to start asking them questions, and then we'll probably open it up at the end, the last 10 minutes, to see if you guys have any questions. The mic will be right down there in the corner, so feel free to come on up and ask them questions. But first, we're going to be talking about, obviously, urban fantasy and maybe why they chose it. But I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves first.
Hi, I'm Martha Carr. I co-created with Michael the Orsaran universe, and I've been writing for about 30 years. I was traditionally published and a journalist, and then there was the Great Recession, and now I write with Michael.
Hello, I'm Judith Behrens.
There you go.
I'm one half of Judith Behrens. The other one is over here. Yeah. And so, but really, Michael Anderle, Unbelievable about Mr. Brownstone, Orsaran, and a couple of other series that are in the urban fantasy, and sci-fi fantasy arena. Looking forward to hearing what you think and, you know, the questions that guy says.
I'm R.J. Blain. I write under like 3 or 4 pseudonyms. I like urban fantasy a lot, but I write weird urban fantasy, so I went the indie route from the beginning because I don't think there's a traditional publisher that would touch my work, but I write magical romantic comedies with a body count, and I love it.
So she's got this glitter on her eyelids, and she like mostly closed her eyes, and I look over, I'm like, she has a silver eye. What the hell?
It is mermaid eyeshadow because I like glitter.
I'm Derek Murphy. I have a background in editing and cover design and then started publishing my own fiction. So I have urban fantasy, young adult, mostly based on historical mythology and things like that I like to put in my stories. I have a mermaid series, so.
Glitter.
Perfect. All right. So with urban fantasy, what was the reason that you chose urban fantasy? Is there a specific niche or a trope?
Well, the honesty is I was writing thrillers, and it just wasn't doing well, and Michael asked if I wanted to write urban fantasy with him. But also, if I had paid more attention to what I like to read, I would have realized that's where I belonged. I mean, I've been a kind of a nerdette since I was born. And I really love the idea that magic actually does exist, and we just haven't figured it out yet, and it could pop up at any moment. And I like bringing that to the stories. So it really was finding something that suited my personality, and then, you know, surprise, surprise, the books took off.
You know, for me, magic is something that's always appealed to me. And being able to do the impossible, including at times being able to throw a fireball and fry someone's ass that really deserves it, was something that I wanted to be able to put down on paper. So it allows me and my creativity to go to worlds that I don't get to personally be in and be a part of. So it allows that part of my personality to exist. And so I love fantasy. I love urban fantasy, partially because I hate world building. And with urban fantasy, I don't have to world build shit. So that's kind of my lean in toward that part.
I would say I love urban fantasy because I can take what I'm comfortable with and make it fun. Magic is fun, and I like making other people have fun. So I like doing it in a setting most of us are really comfortable with, but with that what if magic was real element to it. And so I just naturally gravitated to urban fantasy.
Yeah, same kind of thing. I like the idea that magic could be real to real people, to ordinary people. So the main difference is you can pair all this fantastical stuff with regular people doing very regular things. A lot of times the pathos or the emotional stuff, if you get too fantasy, you lose a lot of that depth because it seems unrealistic. Where with urban fantasy, you can have real people with normal struggles that everybody goes through side by side, rubbing up against this completely potential magical world. So it's not just pure escapism, it's like reality escapism.
Yeah. So when you're writing urban fantasy or you're coming up with a new series, do you focus more on character growth, or is it world building like Michael loves? Or is it hard magic or a magic system? What is the most, for each of your books or your most successful series, if you want to pick, what is your biggest focus in your writing, in your urban fantasy?
Well, I think the reason why readers come back to book 2 and book 3 is the characters. They want to find out what their friends are doing. The magic's important because it's fun and you have to have a plot or why are you doing it. But the characters are what matter to me. What are they building toward? And can you relate to them? And are you having fun?
Excluding the weight gain since I became an author, I'm usually a pretty skinny guy. And one of the things that I created with Mr. Brownstone was someone that if I could walk around in one day, I might want to walk around like, our friend over there, who's huge and muscular, and then I'd like, I don't give any shit to anybody. And so I created a character that had that attitude. He was a nice guy, but it allowed me to pretend what would it be like in order to be able to do, be Robin, just be Robin for a day. And so in being able to exhibit that life and the fun that I could imagine, the readers were able to then also live it, whether they wanted, like me, to step into that or they wanted to have a friend who was like that. And then I kept them simple. It's just that one personality quirk that I think you can drive into any of your characters that is also part of you. When you put your personality into your characters, you don't have to try to figure out what they would do. And so for my statement would be is find out those aspects of your personality, just a couple, that really drive you and create characters around them.
I'm going to join the character bandwagon. In the urban fantasy genre, the characters are what draw me into reading it, and the characters are why I write it. I love myth, I love legend, I love lore, I love magic, but without the characters, I don't have a story. So at the end of the day, it's fun just to explore what these characters would do in this changed society, magic, legend, what happens when they all mix. But without the characters, it doesn't matter.
Take a world building, you can do it.
Yeah, I feel like being contrary.
Do it.
Yes, characters are important. I think I'm weaker at characters, which is why I focus a lot more on plotting. And I also know for urban fantasy, you can do better and you can write faster and you can sell more if you're more of a pantser and you just really focus on the characters and the tension, the suspense. Whereas I go a little bit too slowly for urban fantasy, and there are these big world buildings. The reason I like the urban part of it is because you can have regular people who are crucial to a larger plot that doesn't exist. So very regular, I write young adult, so it's a young girl who has to save the world and is at the crossroads, like between warring nations. You can just go really big with the world building, but it all revolves around like this certain normal character's quest. It makes her really important, it makes her valuable, which is kind of, so I like the bigger story. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, I think the question was kind of like, where do you get your ideas, sort of. As a cover designer, I do cover first. So I'll buy a pre-made, and it will usually inspire the story. So most of my books have been, I saw art that I liked, and I wrote a book, and then maybe I updated the cover once the book was done. And urban fantasy covers are gorgeous, so they can be such strong pieces of art, and you just want to tell a story so that that character art has like a place to live.
I kind of do the same thing with covers too. Like I'll start a story, but then I'll get a cover, and that's where it really just drives the story home, and it could change everything a lot of times. So the next question would be for a lot of the new authors that are looking at urban fantasy. Are you guys pantsers, or do you plot everything, or do you start with a character first? Or that's kind of bouncing off the last question. Is it world building? Like where do you start your story, and then how do you proceed? What's your process?
I'm more of a plotter, and I do like the main points and all. I have a really strong ending. I end all my books on cliffhangers, and I never finish a sequel. That's been my MO for 5 years. So it's kind of weird, but I'm more of a plotter, and that does slow me down. And I have tried to experiment with pantsing, because I think once you know what you're doing, you don't want to get too lost in the weeds. I like to make sure that the story makes sense and that there's no plot holes. But the important stuff is really the conflict and the scene building and characters, which you can do without plotting if you're good at that stuff. I think whatever, on the one hand, you want to do whatever you can do to do the work, because whatever feels uncomfortable, you probably will avoid. On the other hand, you don't just want to do what's easy, because you probably have to get good at some things that make you uncomfortable. So you don't, like, it's a balance between those two.
I am a planting quilter. So this basically means every book is different. Sometimes I plot, sometimes I pants, sometimes I plant, and sometimes I write the book in little chunks everywhere and quilt them together. So for me, it's very much, what does this book need to come to life? Sometimes I have an idea for the end of the story, so I have to address that first. Sometimes I decide, well, I'm going to write something with a lot of historical reference, so I'm going to have to plot this because I don't know how the story will change based off of what I research. A lot of the times I prefer to plants, which is a mixture of the two, because then I can get a stronger depth into the story because I sort of know where I'm going, but I'm giving myself the freedom to change my mind.
What was the question? No. So, assuming that that I do something a certain way, I'm going to write a series, and I'm going to break it up into 9 books of 3 trilogies, and I'm going to create one arc that's going to go across all 9. Then I'm going to create an arc that goes across all 3. Then I'm going to create a specific story within each of those 3, and it might be just a sentence describing what's going on, and then from that, you know, we'll produce books and we'll produce the trilogy, and by the time the trilogy is out, we should have an idea if we're doing the second part or not, because we are very money focused. I like to do 2 things. I want my fans to want to reread our stories, which has a lot to do with the characters we create, and I want to make money. And so those are the 2 aspects for my personal mountain that you can have or not have. It's okay. There's no judgment related to that. And so that structure of creating the 9 or the 12 in some cases and 3, you know, we've developed that over the years. It used to be 4. You know, we would do things in sets of 4, and we realized that fans really aren't as fond of closing out the bad guy in 4 books as they are in 3. So we're kind of, most of the time, we'll go back down to 3 books and do it in that way and do the trilogy effort. So that's some of the things that we do, but then from a standpoint of, there's a program called Plotter, P-L-O-T-T-R, and I happen to love that one to actually build my plot now. And so I use that, and I think it's both Windows and Mac, but I use a Mac. And the new, by the way, any Apple fans out here? Anyone always realized the Apple 16-inch just got announced this morning?
Yep.
That's right. Yes, I'm like, you know, sorry, bye y'all, I'm going to the Apple store. But really though, so I use Plotter, and then I would use Scrivener for once I've got my plot done, you know, putting it into the order, and I'm just going to start at chapter 1 and I'm going to write through. So that's kind of how I develop it. But first, I've done the characters. Oftentimes I'll do the characters and make sure I like them. How many are familiar with the Star Wars where they put the different actors together before they came up with the set that we know, as Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher? Are y'all familiar with that story? Yes. And so that's kind of how I do. I create characters, and I make sure that I like just 3, you know, and then I will actually finish out the rest of it.
So I'm kind of into world building. And with Orserin, we started with the myth, the legend, that so we knew the baseline story that, because, you know, we know this, to some degree, we know the history of Earth, and it kind of informs what, how everything else fits together. So with Orserin, it was 2 planets that come together at a certain time, and magic spreads from one to the other, and it had a lot of detail in it. From there, then you create the individual series that go within the world, and then you know if they fit together or not. We're working on a new one, Terra Navas. It's Earth is really a ship, and everything on it was passengers and cargo, and it got stuck in the sun's orbit. It also tells me if there's enough room for others to come and play with us, and if it'll hold up. And then we try to write the origin story and create the characters from that, and those characters really have to be complex because they're holding, it's kind of like their atlas holding up the universe. And would you really like to hang around them? I mean, I think that's a question I ask myself, is would I want to hang out with them? And then, you know, it leaves room for others to really explore. I mean, Orserin, I think, has about 140 books now, and lots of others have come and played with us, and it's still going strong. And readers ask us, is this an Orserin? Because that's what I want more of. Because they've come to love the characters so much, they just want to, it's like an ongoing, it's like a telenovela. And
Netflix, here we go.
There you go.
if anyone's listening. And we've also had to create timelines so they can see how the books fit together. And that all started with we like to take history and then say, this is what the humans know, but it was really magic, and it's just a lot of fun. So that's what I start with is I know you can start with a standalone series. It's just my nature. I like the bigger picture, and I like the idea that the crowd is going to come and write with me. For me, it's more fun.
So let's kind of back up because I'm
What
sure
about you?
Go ahead.
What about
me?
you?
I typically, like I was saying with the cover, I'll typically come up with an idea, maybe 3 points that I think are really cool, and then sometimes I'll come up with an outline that's maybe 20,000 words, and then I'll totally trash it. So it just kind of depends, but I'm definitely more of a free writer. Every time I try to do too meticulous of an outline, I break away from it and come up with something way better because I really focus on character growth with my books. So as the character interacts through, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, they might do something that I didn't anticipate. And so I let them kind of take charge. And that really kind of drives home with the readers because they realize that everything is emotionally tied to Nate Temple or whoever my character is, and that it makes more sense than me trying to force a narrative down the story with this bad guy or this bad guy, that Nate's really just kind of flying by the seat of his pants and doing whatever he thinks he needs to do. And that makes his anger, his happiness, his sadness, any kind of trials and tribulations he faces, it makes it a lot more impacting. And so my readers seem to really like that.
How many here know what cow tipping is? Have you all heard the term? He put a scene where people cow tipped the Minotaur.
Chapter
That was
1,
funny as
book
shit
1.
ever.
Yep, chapter 1, book 1. That was always my thing, is I tried going the traditional publishing route. It didn't work very well. Got about 100 rejection letters, and just thought I sucked at writing. And so I went to Amazon and heard about this self-publishing thing that was kind of a big deal, or becoming a big deal. I decided to give it a try, and I made maybe $12 a month for probably 3 years. I made no money. And then I heard about a guy named Mark Dawson who was selling this snake oil course that was supposed to help you. Decided
He's
to give it a
since
try.
made a much better course than that one.
Yes, it's much better now. But yeah, I took that, cashed in my 401k, and then
Did not tell his wife.
did not tell my wife that. But cashed in my 401k and then just devoted everything to the marketing. And I think that's made all the difference because that same book that was making no money, no sales whatsoever, all of a sudden went to 4 figures the first month. I applied Mark's stuff and then 5 figures and then up and up and up. So that was actually going to be one of my next questions is how important is the writing versus the marketing? What kind of percentage of time allocation do you guys have?
We're going to start down here.
Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just talking about this with somebody else a few hours ago, so it's kind of fresh for me. I prefer to focus as much of my time on writing as possible, but marketing is critical. If you don't market your books, no one can find you. You're not going to be able to put your book on Amazon and magically get lucky. That's not how this business works. You have to market. How you market, however, is very flexible. Because I want to focus most of my time on writing, I rely heavily on BookBub to do my marketing for me. I go in to get featured deals. I do new release featured deals, and I do the standard featured deals. And most of the time, I can just cruise on that. But it is challenging. I must market, or my books just go. And I took off 3-4 months to focus on writing, and my earnings were cut to 1/3 of what it used to be, just because I was writing rather than marketing. I was curious to see how much of a difference that marketing made, but I would have made 5 figures instead of 4 figures for those months if I had just spent that extra hour a day plugging at the marketing rather than spending that extra hour writing. For me, it is a difference between an hour of marketing a day can be the difference between 4 figures a month and 5 figures a month.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin on it because when people talk about marketing, they're usually thinking the book is published, everything's done, I need more visibility. Almost always, for almost everybody, your blurb and your cover isn't strong enough or you haven't identified the right audience, so you're not positioning your product to meet the right demand who's already looking. A lot of the stuff I do is organic SEO, so I I build content on purpose that people are already searching for, so I don't have to convince them to buy it. You still need enough content and enough marketing, but a lot of times I don't recommend rapid release, because instead of making the same mistakes on a whole trilogy, you could put out one book or one sample book and make sure you have the cover right and the blurb right and make sure there's an audience there. To know, I mean, and it's weird. I put out, I think I have 8 open series. So I've experimented with a lot of things that don't work, but I learned very quickly where the market is and what they like, and now I can write to market much better. So that was part of it. Rather than the marketing, focus on the product and maybe even launch with something smaller to test the market. But the other thing is, the people with the most content are going to win. So if you can put out books that are like a 4.3, and like someone was saying earlier with the procrastination, it's better to have something done than perfect. Like if the story is there and people like this story, the only thing that matters is if they keep reading to the end of the book. And if you can write a book where they keep reading to the end, they don't put it down, that's enough. And you don't really have to polish to get that, the 97 to the 100%, because that's not going to make the biggest impact. It's really going to matter how many books do you have out, how much can you afford to spend on Amazon advertising when you're competing against people with 30 books, 100 books. So somewhere like that.
Oh, you should go next.
Okay. So my story is a little bit different. I have a learning disability. I can't see numbers. And so I will never be able to do ads well, and I have to rely on people. And I can't even understand often what they're trying to tell me. I can only tell by, frankly, the money that's coming in. And doing things on my own, all I did was raise my stress level. So I partner with Michael and LMBPN, and often when Michael tells me how a book is doing, my next question is that good? And because of that, also I have a unique perspective. Because I collaborate with so many authors, I've also gotten to see who's doing really well and who's doing not as well, but not as well on a level playing field. And it's always the people who are engaging in social media who are doing better. Those who are having active conversations and posting personal things, they do really substantially better than those who have the equally good book and a book that launched equally as well, but it just doesn't have the tail that the others had. And it's the personal relationship, because we do put out so many books that the second part of that is you also want to be the book that they want to read first. And the way you do that is the personal relationship. And also, just so you know, so I collaborate completely, and I make well into 6 figures every year, and I don't have as much stress, and I don't have as much work. So who's winning?
Yep.
So I'm going to turn this around on Shayne, because he mentioned before he started Mark Dawson's course, and I happen to believe that Shayne spent are you all sitting down? Excellent. Shayne, what did you do over the summer, and how much did that run?
You talking about when I was first starting after all that? Like the 6 months?
Yeah, the big stuff here with relatively recently.
Oh, recently, with Amazon ads?
Yes.
Yeah, so probably about 50,000 a month. So that was in the display ads, the AMG display ads, the sponsored products. So.
And what would you say to that? Because there might be a few people here in the audience who are like, wait, I didn't even realize you could spend. And this is a concierge service. Yeah. And the first question they ask you is, how much do you make? Because the second one's going to be, I'm sorry, that's not enough. Yep. And so, you got involved in it and you went into it. So just from that, what do you take away from that?
So it's just you start thinking about it where you're not just a writer anymore, you're not just a storyteller, and you really have to switch hats. Like Martha was saying, you have to find out what you're good at, what are you weak at. And so there's certain avenues with advertising. Facebook's always changing, and so I was looking for new ways to promote my stuff. And so I met some people at NINC, I met some of the Amazon reps there, and started talking to them about what other kind of avenues there were for advertising. And they brought up AMG, which is just kind of a sponsored product display, but it's hefty. And so every time, basically, when you open up your Kindle, you might see my book if you're interested in fantasy. Either one of my books. I've been doing it for the last, 5-6 months probably.
And then just from that perspective, over the last 6 months, do you see the same lift in month 6 as month 1? I've
I mean,
heard different things.
The first month was exponentially bigger, but it's definitely still returning enough for us to keep doing it, obviously.
Okay.
And so we're looking at doing it. I'm looking at doing it on my new series that I just started. So I've got book 1 just came out, and it hit, I think, top 50 something on Amazon. And then book 2 comes out in a couple of weeks, and then book 3 in December. So I was just talking yesterday to Amazon about setting up a campaign for that trilogy. So, but it's just bigger decisions that you start realizing you're making, and it's if you,
Right. So, I mean, you have to, the idea being you're going to be $50K a month at 3 months before you get that first money back. So you're all in on 150 grand. That's a bit of a something really rude here in order to accomplish that. But that's kind of where some of the authors and the companies that are doing this are now going to the AMG area. We had a chance to do AMG, and we were going down that path, and then we had changed covers because I had shown the cover that was, you know, live on Death Becomes Her millions of times already. So I didn't think that was a viable product to go and do that. And so the cover that we brought in, we knew, you know, in Amazon ads, you cannot have a gun, you're not supposed to have a gun aimed at the reader. So we had a gun aimed over here, which everybody except you people shouldn't be aimed at you. Yeah, so like 2 days before we start or 3 days before we start, it gets either like, you can't have this cover. And I'm like, we can, what we do is not go with you. And so we did our own version of AMG. And to be fair, we did about $50,000, but it took us 3 months to do it, not 1. And what I learned was it was until about 30 to 35,000 that you could definitively see the uplift and feel comfortable with it. So when they say, you know, you need to do $45,000, $50,000 a month, that's because you'll see the results a lot sooner as you're spending, you know, $1,500 a day on this. I imagine your first week or 2 was a little bit.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, you write that check and hope for the best. But you're right. There is a threshold that once you hit it, it really skyrockets up.
Right. So, and Amazon knows this. I mean, they have all access to, they can do things such as target everybody who's never seen one of your ads you've personally ever done. So they can really get you out there. So that's some of the, on the high side.
Yeah.
On the low side of what we do, we have so many series out, and I don't care to have a head count in the hundreds, that we use Press Design, like I had mentioned before, to do the older series that still need some juice every month. And Press Design is a company where you can set up ads and you can say, hey, try to hit this ACOX, and you adjust it here, and you're only allowed to go up here, and you're only allowed to do that. And if you speak with David Beers, who's somewhere around, he'll let you know that, you know, expect 1 to 2 weeks before this thing even kind of clues in. But, you know, our purpose for doing that is that we don't want any of our series to fail getting some love every month. And it takes a lot of work to do some of this. So that's one of the ways that we're automating our marketing. We focus on the front line with the people, and then eventually it's going to get to a support methodology. We use Facebook ads. We like them. We're testing percentage-wise, you know, how much are we going to weight AMS ads versus Facebook versus BookBub. We do recognize, or at least we've heard that, you know, with BookBub, you're going to do some besides one of their featured deals. It's either 99 cents or 0. Trying to, for us, it has not been effective if we have a full price book and then do a BookBub ad. Yeah. So there's, you know, those situations. And now that I'm a nobody over on all of the other locations, you know, we're still struggling with some of the marketing questions that we have. You know, we're trying out new things. Clark's World, you know, which is a sci-fi magazine website. So we've got 3 months that we're working with them, trying to reach out and reach new people. So we'll know more certainly next year than we do this year on the wide aspect of things. Whether or not we need advertising, in the beginning I did not. You know, I was doing 6 figures a month with about $3,000 worth of ad spend, which is phenomenally awesome. But what we've come to learn is that was a very unique series, very unique series that was able to capture the imagination. The characters were able to hit it. And while we've done successful series, and I've done successful series since, that one I shouldn't point to necessarily. So it's one of those things, you can be successful without or very minimal advertising, but it had better be kick-ass, and it better be causing people to talk to each other and saying, you know, go to their neighbor that they hate and go, you need to read this book. Otherwise, advertising really, even $5 a day, can help start bringing the trickle in, because especially if you bring people from off-site Amazon, so if you bring Facebook in and then Facebook registers someone coming from some other location, and they're saying they're going to start tracking what's your closure rate. And once they have a closure rate, they'll start doing something. And then the bonus is if ever they put in those emails that go out and going, hey, Michael Anderle, you might like this. Oh, here's other stuff. Well, if you reach a high enough pinnacle, they'll put your book in that little thing at the bottom, and then all of a sudden your sales are going to start increasing, and you have no friggin' reason why. We've had series that, you know, we're still to this day going, why did that series take off? You know, the Federal Witch, or not, that's mine. Yeah, School of Necessary Magic. You know, the first one happened in like April, May, and at first I'm like, man, that's a great.
Tell them what happened on the first day. On the first day of School of Necessary Magic, Amazon accidentally sent out the right cover and the wrong book. Ooh. And it was on pre-order, so a lot of people got that. And then people started leaving 1 stars saying why, which we had nothing to do with. And we actually had to prove to Amazon that it wasn't us, so they would. But we also said, just tell us, we'll give you the right book. And so that was the launch of an entire series. And we were actually laughing for some reason. I guess it was
That or cry.
that or cry.
It was a crying laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks later, the book suddenly took off like a rocket. And to this day, we don't really know why, except that perhaps in hindsight, we had started an Academy book at the very start in that sweet period when everybody wanted it and there wasn't much, and we just got lucky, frankly.
We talked about Academy. We said we wanted to be the next J.K. Rowling. Missed, by the way. Shoot for the stars. Landed a little bit lower. We were the next Jewish barons.
So,
next question, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, we should probably open it up for questions from the audience if you guys have any, or we can keep going. Just whatever you guys want. Does anyone have any questions?
I was a young boy. Oh, thank God, a question.
Okay. Let them have it.
Cannot hear you yet.
Hello? Okay.
There you go.
So, I write about a woman who unexpectedly inherits a New Orleans voodoo shop, and she has the magical ability to change evil people good. And I have it, and my publisher has it as paranormal romance, but now that I'm listening to people talking about urban fantasy, I'm not really sure.
Should there be man chest on the cover? I mean, real nipple,
I
six-pack
don't like
abs.
man chest.
It's a simple question.
No, there
Then
wouldn't
there's
be
your
man
answer.
chest.
If you take the romance out of it, is there still a story?
Oh, that's the correct answer.
Yeah, her
Then it
her
shouldn't be romance.
story is
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, yours
the
is better,
romance
but-
is second.
Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not paranormal romance, and also paranormal romance readers tend to be very adamant about that and will ding you for it,
Yep.
and you're in the wrong category. And you
Okay.
might have the wrong cover too, because urban fantasy covers are very trope-oriented, unless
Okay.
you're Shayne Silvers, and then it's whatever you want.
So
I just break the rules. That's what I try to do.
I originally wrote my book based on the female protagonist, but then I couldn't get it published, so I tried submitting to a romance publisher, and it got accepted, and so she wanted me to amp up the romance. So maybe it was urban fantasy to start with, and then I kind of got pushed over. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hello. I have my. Sorry. Okay. So, I have a hobby of writing various stuff within the realms of science fiction and fantasy, and sometimes combinations of the two. And sometimes I end up pondering how to take magic and apply realism into it, like integrate the concept of magic into reality in a way that's understandable, I guess. Because magic oftentimes just says, because magic. But oftentimes, but there have been times where I look for reasons, or why does it work? How does it work? So do you have any advice on that? Like, whatever.
So I love the exact same thing. I mean, we've come up with a term called Magitech for it,
Yeah,
and we
that's my
love
favorite.
that sort of thing. And the Lyric Chronicles that started Orsarin, the two evil sides from the magic and from technology were creating bio warfare that combined old artifacts and first animals, then humans, to create magic and technology and sci-fi mixed together. The new Terra Navas does it even more. I think it's like, I've also noticed that fans who like urban fantasy like sci-fi. Fans who like fantasy don't necessarily cross over. And so I slide sci-fi or technology into things all the time. I know buddies of mine, Aronofsky does the same thing. And so you just have to you have to use the rules of Earth. And if you break them, you have to give a reason why it's legitimate. And then when you introduce the magic, it has to behave with its own rules. Like electricity, you don't see, but you know the rules. So you're creating the rules, and then you just have to be consistent, and then it works. You can't say, and I threw a fireball at it. You're really going to have to come up with, do it.
Michael does.
And but and then I agree with you. It's so much more fun because then you have really created something that, maybe it does exist.
Right.
Everything in Star Trek, you can find out now. Here you go.
Either, because I have an answer. Either you want it at the moment? Yeah, you're good. All right, so if you look at science, everything is energy except gravity, correct?
Right.
So the quicker you go, so everything is energy. When you understand that premise, how do you warp energy into solid again? And can you transmute the properties in the process? Because energy is the most basic item.
True.
So technically, that is an answer.
Thank you for your time.
Mic drop.
This question is for Shayne. So you mentioned for 3 years you're making $12 a month. Without getting too personal into your financial matters, approximately how much did you take to finally get it moving? Like you cashed out your 401. For some of us, we're older and we have big 401ks.
Yeah. So
a lot more risk.
No, I did not have a big 401k.
Yeah.
Be careful with your wife.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
you're talking about when I started, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when I started, I think I had like a $1,500 or an $1,800 401k. But it was pretty much everything I had to my name. I was a credit analyst at a bank, making $30,000 a year maybe. And so I had a new baby. I just got married. So like I was finishing school, I had no money, and I had to work. And so what I did is I cashed in that 401k, told my wife that there was a cool investment that I found, and I was a banker, so you should trust me.
Yeah.
And so, but I was watching Mark Dawson's course and figuring out how to do ads. I knew that I had enough to buy his course and only put in maybe $5 a day on ads on Facebook advertising. And I had to build a website. I had to do a newsletter. I had all these things. So I really broke it down, and I had $1,800 to spend. That's it, because we had diapers and everything else to buy.
So you just keep rolling it in once?
Yeah, and then I rolled profits in. Yeah, my dad always taught me, he's a business owner. He said, don't invest in something unless you can use your profit from before to invest in it. So I broke his first rule, or I broke his rule the first time, but then every time I made a profit after that, I would roll it right into advertising and see how I can exponentially grow it.
Thank you for that context.
One more question. We have like 37 seconds, or we get
I
hurt.
have a very similar question. What percentage of your income do you reinvest in ads? Like, what do you think is reasonable without being too aggressive, like, some of us who don't.
We try to cap out at 20%. Oh, so the question is, what's the max that you do?
Yeah.
We tend to do at least 10 to 20% now, but we did not in the beginning. It does depend on the series.
I'm also in the 20% camp. However, if I get a book bub for a title that I think will sell really well, I will throw down $20,000 and go, let's do this. And the last time I did that, I hit number 72 on USA Today.
I don't think I have an answer for that.
You don't have an answer.
I don't either.
There we go.
Thank you.
Look at that, and it's 0.
There you go. Time's up. Thanks you guys for coming.
And thank you everyone here. If you get a chance, mingle, make sure you create relationships.
Aronofsky's in the front row.
Mini Ninja is in the front row, if you can find her.
Oh, she's dressed like a ninja. Tell him that.
That's the ninja.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.